The wind howled through the rugged mountains of northern conflict territory, carrying dust and the faint metallic scent of war. In the dim, pre-dawn light, Sergeant Ava Carter moved silently with her squad, her boots crunching against rocks, eyes scanning every shadow. A seasoned soldier, she had learned the hard way that instincts were worth more than orders, and her instincts screamed that something was wrong. 12 men strong at the start of the mission, her squad had already lost their sense of calm the moment they entered enemy territory. Silence was supposed to be their ally, but tonight it felt like a predator circling. There were no distant shouts, no patrolling guards, only the cold mountain air pressing against their skin and the soft echo of their own footsteps. Ava adjusted the strap of her rifle and whispered, "Stay alert. Too quiet isn't quiet. It's waiting." Her voice was calm, measured, but there was steel behind it. Her eyes flicked to each teammate, faces tight with concentration, breaths shallow. The mission was straightforward, at least on paper: infiltrate the enemy's weapons facility, gather intelligence, and get out. But no mission ever stayed on paper. Hours into the trek, Ava's intuition screamed louder than ever. The terrain ahead was familiar to scouts, but something about the patterns in the shadows made her uneasy. The rocks had been disturbed recently, signs of footprints partially obscured. Not enough for panic, but enough for caution. She motioned her team to slow, moving like ghosts against the rugged mountainside. From the ridge above, the first hint of trouble came as a faint, almost imperceptible glint, metal reflecting the faint light, moving too methodically to be natural. Ava froze. Her heart raced, but her face betrayed nothing. She raised a hand, signaling the squad to halt. The squad obeyed instantly, rifles raised, scanning the tree line. The mountain was quiet again. Too quiet. "Command, do you read?" one soldier whispered into the radio. Static hissed back at them. Jammed. Ava cursed under her breath. No backup, no extraction. Just them, alone. Then, without warning, the world erupted. A thunderous explosion tore through the ridge where they had just passed. Rocks and dirt shot into the air, raining down like shrapnel. Soldiers screamed. Gunfire erupted from every direction, echoing off the jagged cliffs. Smoke and dust obscured vision. Ava dove behind a shattered wall, firing instinctively. Bullets pinged off rocks, kicked up clouds of dirt, and tore through what little cover the team had. She shouted commands, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Regroup! Regroup now!" But regrouping was easier said than done. Within moments, her squad was scattered. One by one, her comrades fell, some to enemy bullets, some to explosions. She saw Private Morales clutch his chest and collapse, screaming. Another soldier was dragged into the shadows by unseen hands. Panic set in, but Ava forced herself to remain calm. Amid the chaos, she noticed movement out of her corner of eye, figures slipping between rocks, shadows blending into the darkness. Too many, far too many. Her mind raced. The ambush was perfect. Every step they had taken had been anticipated. The enemy knew the terrain better than them, controlled every angle, and had prepared a killing zone. Ava's training kicked in. She counted remaining teammates. 2 were left, both injured, both terrified. Her hands were steady despite the adrenaline, her breathing controlled. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. "Stay low, move to the rocks, cover each other," she barked, dragging one of the injured soldiers behind a boulder. The other followed shakily, trembling but obedient. The bullets continued to rain down. The deafening cacophony made it impossible to hear anything else. The crunch of boots, the hiss of gunfire, the screams of the fallen, all blending into a nightmarish symphony. Ava gritted her teeth and fired back, picking off targets one by one. She moved like a shadow, silent but deadly, her body low, her senses stretched to their limit. Somewhere in the midst of the chaos, she caught a glimpse of the enemy commander, tall, commanding, moving with purpose. He was orchestrating the assault as if it were a chess game, and they were mere pawns. Rage flared inside her, not at fear, but at the injustice, at the audacity of thinking they could break her. Ava's mind flicked through options. Retreat was nearly impossible. The mountains were a labyrinth, enemy forces blocked all routes, and communications were dead. Her team couldn't survive running blindly, but if they stayed, they would be easy targets. Then she noticed a gap, a narrow ridge path partially hidden by rocks. It wasn't safe, but it might be the only way to regroup, to survive. "Move!" she shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. She dragged one of the injured soldiers with her, guiding the other with a firm hand. Bullets whizzed past them, but they moved fast, hearts pounding, sweat and blood mixing on their skin. Even as they moved, Ava assessed the enemy. They were well-trained, disciplined, and confident. Overconfidence would be their downfall, but only if she could survive long enough to exploit it. Halfway along the ridge, another explosion shook the ground beneath them, throwing Ava to her knees. Her shoulder stung where shrapnel grazed her skin. She gritted her teeth, rising, refusing to let pain slow her. Every step was a fight, every breath a challenge. The enemy didn't know she had survived this far. They assumed the ambush had finished them off. That assumption was going to be their mistake. Ava finally reached a small outcropping, a natural cover point. Her squad was no longer whole. 2 down, more likely missing or dead. She looked over the battlefield, chaos everywhere, smoke curling into the pre-dawn sky. Her heart pounded, but she remained unbroken. Survival wasn't just about staying alive, it was about fighting back, taking control, and turning the tables. "Stay with me," she whispered to the remaining soldier, who nodded weakly, eyes wide with fear. "We're not done yet, not by a long shot." Above them, enemy patrols moved, unaware of how close their hunter already was. Ava adjusted her rifle, her mind racing. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The first part of her fight had ended, but the real battle, the one that would define her, was only beginning. The first light of dawn was weak, struggling to cut through the smoke and haze of battle. Jagged rocks cast long shadows over the scarred mountainside, hiding both danger and opportunity. Sergeant Ava Carter pressed herself flat against a boulder, her body trembling from fatigue and adrenaline. The acrid smell of gunpowder burned in her nostrils, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Around her, the battlefield was silent, an eerie calm that made her skin crawl. She was outnumbered, severely, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of isolation pressing on her. The ambush had killed or scattered her squad. Only one injured soldier remained with her, pale and trembling, too shocked to speak. Ava's mind raced. She had to make a decision, freeze and risk being slaughtered, or fight smart and try to survive. Her voice, calm but commanding, cut through the silence. "Keep low, move with me," she whispered to the soldier beside her. His eyes met hers, wide, panicked, desperate, but there was something in her tone, a promise of survival, that made him obey. The enemy had spread out, their numbers overwhelming. From the ridge above, she could see shadows shifting, weapons glinting in the weak sunlight. Every step she took had to be calculated. One mistake could be the end. Ava scanned the terrain, memorizing every boulder, every slope, every jagged edge she could use. The mountains had always been unforgiving, but now they were her ally. She had trained for scenarios like this, not the kind where numbers were stacked against her, but the kind where strategy, stealth, and mental toughness mattered more than brute force. "Listen to me," she murmured, voice low but firm. "We're not dead yet. We survive, we fight back, but you have to trust me." Her companion nodded, swallowing hard. Together, they began moving through the rocks, sticking to shadows, avoiding the open ground. Every noise made her flinch. Every movement could be a sniper, a scout, a soldier waiting to finish them off. Halfway down a narrow ridge, the enemy spotted them. Shouts rang out, gunfire followed, and the mountains once again erupted in chaos. Ava dropped to the ground, rolling behind a natural stone barrier, pulling her companion with her. Bullets tore through rock and dirt, leaving craters in the ground around them. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, and this time the cat was desperate, but dangerous. Ava quickly assessed their situation. They were cornered from both sides. Retreat was impossible. Advancing meant running straight into enemy lines. Her mind raced. She had a limited supply of ammunition, a wounded partner, and dozens of enemies surrounding them. But she remembered her training. The instructors had drilled it into her. Use your environment. Make the enemy think you are where you are not. Turn fear into advantage. Taking a deep breath, Ava began laying small traps with the rocks and debris around her, loose stones poised to roll down the slope, creating distractions. Branches snapped strategically to mimic footsteps elsewhere. She whispered instructions to her companion, guiding him to mimic movement in a different direction while she prepared an ambush point. The first enemy soldier crested the ridge, scanning the area cautiously. Ava waited, heart pounding, fingers trembling on the trigger. When the man stepped into the kill zone, she fired. The shot echoed across the mountains, and the soldier collapsed. It was enough to buy a few seconds. Ava signaled her companion to move. They crept along the rocks, silent and careful, each step calculated. But the enemy was relentless. Reinforcements had arrived, and the circle was tightening. Bullets zipped past them, kicking up dust and debris. Each explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. Ava felt a sharp sting as a fragment grazed her arm, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. Suddenly, a hail of gunfire tore through the ridge behind them. Ava's companion froze. Panic overtook him, and he stumbled into open ground. Ava didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, pulling him down, shouting, "Move! Move!" Bullets ricocheted around them. Dust and smoke blinded them for a moment. When she looked up, she realized he was badly injured. Her mind raced. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan. She scanned the mountainside and spotted a ruined stone outpost, likely abandoned, likely dangerous, but it offered cover. "We go there," she said, voice sharp, commanding. "It's our only chance." With every ounce of strength, she dragged her companion along, moving from cover to cover. The enemy pursued relentlessly, but Ava used every trick she knew: distraction, stealth, deception. At one point, she lured a small patrol into a rockfall trap, taking down several soldiers at once. Her pulse raced with adrenaline, each success fueling her determination. Finally, they reached the ruined outpost. Ava helped her companion inside, pressing his wound as best she could. Her own injuries were bleeding freely, but she ignored them. Survival came first. Inside the outpost, she took a moment to catch her breath, listening carefully. The enemy patrolled the perimeter, but had not detected them yet. She whispered instructions to her companion, improvising a defensive strategy. Stones, rubble, and broken walls became weapons, cover, and vantage points. Hours passed. Each sound outside made her tense. She was outnumbered, exhausted, wounded, but she was still alive. And as the sun rose higher, casting light over the battlefield, Ava's mind sharpened. She had survived the ambush. She had lost her team, but she was still in control. And the thought that the enemy underestimated her, assuming fear would break her, fueled a quiet, burning rage. Ava's eyes scanned the horizon, calculating, planning. This wasn't just survival, it was the start of a counterattack. She was alone, outnumbered, but she was a soldier, trained, disciplined, and unbreakable. And they would soon learn that one warrior, with the right strategy, the right instincts, and the will to fight, could turn the tide even against overwhelming odds. Night had fallen like a heavy curtain over the mountains, swallowing the battlefield in shadows. The cold bit through Ava's tattered uniform, but the physical pain was secondary to the gnawing weight of isolation. She was alone now. The surviving soldier from her squad had not made it. She had watched him fall during the last skirmish, unable to save him. The sight replayed relentlessly in her mind, threatening to crush her resolve, but she refused to give in. Ava leaned against the crumbling wall of the ruined outpost, her body trembling from fatigue, blood loss, and adrenaline. Every inch of her ached. Her arms, shoulders, and legs burned from carrying her injured teammate, from diving behind rocks, from dodging explosions. Her mind raced as she counted the losses. Too many, too fast. The enemy had retreated for now, but she knew it was temporary. They were closing in, regrouping, preparing to finish what they had started. Ava's instincts screamed at her. She couldn't stay in one place for long. Every second wasted was a second closer to death. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Pain and exhaustion clawed at her, threatening to pull her down into despair. She pressed her hands against her temples, trying to steady her racing mind. Flashbacks hit her like punches. Training day after day under the scorching sun, instructors yelling at her to push harder, run faster, shoot better. "You're not strong enough," they had said. Her mother's tearful goodbye at the military base, her voice full of worry, full of hope. "Come back to me, Ava. Come back alive." The faces of her fallen squadmates, their trust, their fear, their courage, flashing in her mind like a broken slideshow. Tears mixed with dirt and blood. For a fleeting moment, she considered giving up, surrendering to the night. But surrender was not an option. Not for her. Ava gritted her teeth and rose, using the crumbling wall for support. The air was filled with silence now, almost unnatural after hours of gunfire and chaos. But silence was dangerous. It meant the enemy was watching, waiting, calculating. She needed to move. She needed to survive. She needed to fight. Surveying the ruined outpost, Ava began improvising. Rocks became projectiles. Broken planks and metal scraps became traps. She whispered to herself, her voice low but steady. "They'll come. They'll try to corner me, but I am not their prey. I am the predator." Hours passed. The night deepened. From the ridges surrounding the outpost, she heard the subtle sounds of the enemy. Boots crunching on gravel, whispers in the darkness, rifles being readied. They were outnumbering her by dozens, yet each movement they made gave her opportunities. She remembered what her old drill sergeant had said. "Fear is only a weakness if you let it control you. Let it sharpen you instead." Ava's fear had transformed into focus. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat became a tool of precision. She knew the enemy assumed she was weak, broken, perhaps hiding, perhaps already dead. That assumption would be their downfall. Carefully, she set small traps, tripwires made from thin rope, rocks precariously balanced to roll down and distract, debris to make noise and mislead them about her location. She whispered instructions into the darkness for herself, rehearsing her movements mentally, preparing for the confrontation she knew was coming. Then she heard it. The shuffle of feet, the soft crack of a branch under weight, voices low but urgent. The enemy had begun their sweep. They were closing in. Ava's heart pounded, her hands steady on her rifle. She allowed herself one breath, then took another. She would not panic. She would not falter. The first enemy soldier stepped into her trap, a poorly lit corridor between rocks, and a cascade of debris tumbled down, knocking him off balance. Before he could react, Ava fired a precise shot. The silence that followed was deafening. The others froze. Confusion rippled through their ranks. She moved like a shadow, silent, calculating. Her injuries throbbed with every step, her bloodied uniform clinging to her skin, but her mind was sharp, razor-focused. The enemy's confidence was faltering, their morale was crumbling, and Ava's determination burned brighter with every passing second. Hours dragged on. Fatigue threatened to overwhelm her, but she pressed forward, hunting the hunters. She struck in the darkness, vanished, reappeared. She used her knowledge of the terrain like a weapon, each movement carefully calculated. At one point, she stumbled upon an enemy patrol that had no idea she was near. They laughed, confident. They were arrogant. Ava's lips curled into a faint, deadly smile. She set her trap. A few precise shots, a rolling boulder, and the patrol was gone before anyone knew what happened. But the fight wasn't over. She was alone, injured, surrounded. And yet, with each victory, her resolve hardened. For a fleeting moment, she paused, looking up at the stars piercing the dark sky. She whispered softly to herself, a vow to those she had lost. "I will survive. I will make it out alive. I will honor you." She pressed forward, her body screaming, her mind a fortress. The enemy would learn the hard way that she was not just another soldier to eliminate. She was a force of nature, a warrior forged in pain, sharpened by loss, unstoppable because she refused to die. The night seemed endless, but each movement brought her closer to the moment where she would no longer hide, where she would strike with precision, with vengeance, with everything she had. And as she readied herself for what she knew was coming, the final confrontation that would decide her survival, Ava felt something she hadn't in hours, a surge of clarity. She wasn't just surviving, she was preparing to fight back, not just for herself, but for her squad, for her family, for every soldier who had fallen and trusted her. And with that realization, she whispered into the night, "If they want me, they'll have to come through me, and I am ready." The first light of dawn barely touched the jagged peaks of the mountains, casting long shadows across a battlefield littered with smoke, debris, and the remnants of an ambush gone horribly wrong. Sergeant Ava Carter crouched behind a collapsed stone wall, rifle clutched tightly, her bloodied hands shaking but steady. She was alone, exhausted, and severely wounded, but she was far from defeated. From the ridges surrounding the outpost, enemy forces began moving. Their numbers were overwhelming, dozens of soldiers converging, confident that the one remaining target, a lone, battered soldier, would fall easily. They had underestimated her, and that mistake would cost them everything. Ava took a slow, deep breath, focusing on the rhythm of her heartbeat. Her body screamed in protest, muscles burned, blood throbbed, and a sharp pain radiated from her shoulder where shrapnel had lodged itself. Every step she had taken to survive had left her bruised, cut, and broken. But she had something the enemy did not. She refused to give up. Every soldier she had lost flashed in her mind, their faces, their voices, their trust in her. She had promised to survive. She would not fail. The enemy moved closer. They believed the fight was already over. Ava allowed herself a brief, calculated smile. The battle had only just begun. She rose silently, her movements deliberate, fluid, and deadly. Her first move was a diversion. She triggered a makeshift trap, sending rocks tumbling down the slope with a deafening crash. Shouts erupted among the enemy ranks. Soldiers scattered, momentarily disoriented. It was enough. Ava darted from her cover, slipping between shadows, striking the first soldier in the flank before he could react. She fired with precision, moving fast, fluid, a ghost in the mountain mist. Each shot counted. Every move was calculated. She could not afford mistakes. The enemy began to understand they were not hunting a wounded soldier. They were being hunted. Panic spread through their ranks. Confidence turned to fear. Ava's mind sharpened. Her body pushed past the pain. She ducked behind rocks, rolled into cover, fired, and disappeared into the shadows again. A handful of enemy soldiers fell before they even knew what hit them. But her injuries were catching up. Blood seeped through her uniform. Her strength waned. She stumbled, almost giving herself away. One enemy soldier noticed and raised his weapon. Ava froze for a heartbeat, then remembered her training. Use your instincts. Be faster. Be smarter. Strike first. She rolled, fired, and the soldier fell. Her hands shook, but her aim remained true. She pressed forward, every step calculated, every heartbeat a weapon. The enemy regrouped, converging from multiple angles. It was a trap within a trap. She was completely surrounded. The circle was closing. Ava's breath came in ragged gasps. She knew she couldn't take them all head on. Instead, she used guerrilla tactics, disappearing into shadows, striking isolated enemies, retreating, and setting traps to divide their forces. The battle raged. Explosions shook the mountainside. Smoke curled around her, masking her movements. One by one, soldiers fell. confused, terrified, unable to predict the source of the attacks. Ava was relentless. Every strike was precise. Every movement was calculated. At one point, she stumbled across a pile of rubble and found a discarded grenade. With careful aim, she lobbed it into a cluster of enemy soldiers, the explosion sending bodies flying and chaos erupting. She didn't pause to admire the result. There was no time. Survival required constant action. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The enemy, exhausted and demoralized, began to retreat slightly, unsure of how one soldier could wreak so much havoc. Ava, too, was running low on ammo. Every shot had to count. Every move had to matter. Then a small group of soldiers tried to flank her from the left. She dropped behind a boulder, breath shallow, pulse hammering. They didn't see her until it was too late. A precise series of shots brought them down before reinforcements could react. Pain tore through her body with every movement, but adrenaline and sheer will kept her going. She refused to fall. She refused to give up. She was fighting not just for her life, for every soldier she had lost, every comrade who had trusted her, and for the warrior she had become. The enemy commander appeared on a ridge above, shouting orders, trying to rally his troops. He didn't know Ava's true position, didn't understand her strategy, and didn't anticipate her final move. Ava loaded her last magazine, gritting her teeth. She made her way to a higher vantage point, using every ounce of strength to scale the rocks. Each movement was agony, but she forced herself upward. From the ridge, she took aim. The enemy commander came into view, shouting, frustrated. Ava fired. The shot struck true. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Without their leader, their cohesion shattered. Ava's mind sharpened. Her body pushed past the pain. She ducked behind rocks, rolled into cover, fired, and disappeared into the shadows again. A handful of enemy soldiers fell before they even knew what hit them. But her injuries were catching up. Blood seeped through her uniform. Her strength waned. She stumbled, almost giving herself away. One enemy soldier noticed and raised his weapon. Ava froze for a heartbeat, then remembered her training. Use your instincts. Be faster. Be smarter. Strike first. She rolled, fired, and the soldier fell. Her hands shook, but her aim remained true. She pressed forward, every step calculated, every heartbeat a weapon. Finally, the last wave of enemies closed in, a small group, cautious, wary, terrified. Ava took a deep breath. She was bleeding, exhausted, and near collapse, but her eyes burned with determination. She stepped out of cover, firing with precision. She ducked, rolled, and rose again, taking down each soldier systematically. Her movements were almost supernatural in their fluidity, every strike deliberate, every shot lethal. The battle ended as the sun rose, casting light over the carnage. Dozens of enemy soldiers lay incapacitated or unconscious. Smoke and dust swirled in the morning air. And at the center of it all stood Sergeant Ava Carter, bloodied, battered, but unbroken. Her body trembled with exhaustion. Every muscle ached, every wound burned, but she had survived. She had fought. She had won. A distant sound broke the silence, the whirring of helicopter blades. Rescue had arrived. Medics and soldiers rushed to the scene, scanning the battlefield in shock at the devastation and the lone figure standing among it. Ava's knees buckled as they reached her, but she straightened, holding herself tall despite the blood and grime. She had done the impossible. Against overwhelming odds, she had fought alone, outnumbered, and survived. One medic asked, breathless, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Ava's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I'm fine," she said, her voice calm, steady, but carrying the weight of what she had endured. "They underestimated me. Big mistake. And with that, she allowed herself to be guided toward the helicopter. Her eyes, though exhausted, held a fire that would not be extinguished. She had survived the impossible. She had become more than a soldier. She had become a warrior.